Welcome back to Switch to Linux and another outdoor philosophy. If I can get that branch out of my way. We're back to discussing our book First Things First, Stephen Covey and Roger Merrill and Rebecca Merrill. And we are on to the 8th chapter now, which is, the 9th chapter now, which is the integrity in the moment of choice. And this is kind of an important discussion because what we're talking about here is having integrity at the very moment that integrity is important to you. Meaning, there are times in our life when we are planning to do one thing, but then some immediate urgent thing steps up in our life and we have to decide, how do we respond? Are we going to respond by just automatically doing that thing that's urgent, or are we going to respond by stopping, considering, and staying on present course, or is there some other option that we can do? And that is what integrity in the moment of choice stands for, what it means. Because basically what is going on here is that we are getting to this point where there's times that we're already focused on our quadrant 2 activities. We're setting aside time. We are taking that perspective of the week. We're setting goals. Maybe we're on a period of time where we're on that rigid part of our life and not on the very basic, like not the flexible parts. Maybe we're on the rigid parts. We are wrapping up one meeting. In fact, the example they use is you're wrapping up a meeting. You're the boss. You're wrapping up a meeting with an employee, and then he comes out and explains to you that there's some serious problem he's been dealing with that will impact his work performance, but you have another meeting coming up in 10 minutes. What do you do? Do you be late for the other meeting? Do you reschedule a time for this guy later where you can give him more time? Do you pawn off your other meeting on someone else, or do you pawn off this guy on somebody else? There's a lot of things you could potentially do. And so this chapter takes that question about these things. And so when you have one of these situations come up, you know, usually this is an urgent thing. So this is either a quadrant 1 or a quadrant 3 item. It's an urgent thing. It may be important or it may not be important, but it is an urgent thing. Usually this is going to be a quadrant 1. It's an important and urgent item. That's generally how this works. But then we have to look at a lot of other things. We have to look at what would society look at as this? How are you perceived in the midst of this decision? You have to look at what are your own expectations and the expectations of others. We have to look at our own values, you know, or how do we operate? How do we think? And we have to be aware and self-conscious of the things that we need to do. And so anytime these types of choices come up, you need to focus on what your principles are. What is your overarching idea? What are the principles in your life? And I'm trying to think of some examples I've encountered these, because there's times I've actually had to come up. In fact, here's a funny story, right? Like, don't co-sign things, all right? Just don't co-sign things. Now, I was kind of a rough guy in college before I became a Christian. I was a kind of a rude guy, really, in all reality. But I was also pretty good with money that time. And we had this kid. I was probably 21 at the time or so, maybe 20 at the time, I'd guess. And I'm 20 years old, and I'm just, you know, doing my thing in the kitchen, working at the restaurant. I'm working to pay myself through college. And this 18-year-old kid, still in high school, he might have been 17 even, still in high school, he comes in, and he's like, will you help me co-sign a loan so I can get a $5,000 stereo for my car? Now, mind you, this guy had a $500 car. He wants to get a co-signer to finance a $5,000 stereo for a $500 car. I looked at him, I said, don't you have a dad? Like, yeah, my dad won't do it. I said, if your dad's not going to co-sign a loan for you, what makes you think I'm going to? Now, of course, I was kind of a rude individual back then, but taking that scenario into hand, somebody comes to you with a situation like that, how do you respond? If you respond in the quick moment, then you will end up doing what the Proverbs talks about, if you have been snared by the words of your mouth, which deals specifically with loans and stuff, that particular verse does. But that situation being said, if you do not take the time to evaluate in the response, you could end up immediately out of gut reaction agreeing to something or doing something that is not actually in your best interest. And so you need to keep that in mind. So keep that choice as to what you do a principle-centered choice. You need to know, like what one of my mentors always says to me, is do the next right thing. So do the next right thing. What are the things you need to do? Do the next right thing. That's what having a principle-centered life actually means. Do the next right thing. All right. So how do we implement making one of these choices? The first is you need to ask with intent. So gather more information. When the request comes, gather more information, but you're not gathering information just to pawn it off. You're not gathering information just to be nice. You're gathering information with the intention of making the best right choice. What is in the best interest for me right now, for the situation right now, for my level of responsibility right now, whether that's my personal life or my business life? What is in the best interest of everything right now? That is what you want to ask. And then they talk about listening without excuses. So when you are getting your answers back, don't be making a lot of excuses as to the types of things you want to do, can't do, etc. You don't want to have a lot of these excuses coming up. So listen intently without all of the excuses that you may encounter. And then finally, you need to act with courage. Don't let fear be the deciding factor in what is best for you. You very well might have to go in and change a meeting around, even an important meeting. Don't base your decision on the fear factor. Have courage. So they didn't actually define courage here, but you know, the courage is best defined by doing a difficult thing, or doing the right thing even when you were afraid of doing it. So that is what courage is. It is not the absence of fear. It is doing the right thing through the fear. In fact, there's a great book on fear. They might discuss that level of courage in that book. I can't remember. I haven't read it for about, 5 or 10 years, but the book is called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, and I think the author is Susan Forwards. I'll try and remember to find it and link it down below. Fabulous book on what courage is and what fear is, but feel the fear and do it anyway is a cool thing. So you don't want to make your decision based upon the fear factor. You want to make your decisions based upon what is best, considering your principles, considering the circumstance, considering your role, considering all these things. So that's what you want to do. And then we have to look at what is at the heart of our decisions. What does the framework look like by which we choose these decisions? And then we have to consider those various endowments. If you remember those various personal endowments, you have the physical endowment. Making sure that you are fit and healthy and exercised. It goes a long way towards things. Like, I can't tell you when the last time I was actually sick, because it's not because I have the super immune system. It's that I eat very good and I get enough exercise that I just don't get sick. I think 2 years ago, maybe, when that really bad flu came around, I think I got sick for about a day. And it really wasn't bad sick. It was just like, I feel uncomfortable now. And so that getting that physical part taken care of goes a long way to accomplishing a lot of other things you want to do. And then we have that mental dimension. Are you growing yourself mentally? Are you moving in those areas? And then the spiritual dimension. Are you really asking those fundamental questions? Whether you are a spiritual person or you are not a spiritual person, are you asking yourself those questions, those greater questions? Why am I here? And it's not plastic. FYI, if you get the joke. And then the social dilemma, the social dimension is, are you considering the relationships in your choice-making processes? So when we live by our conscience, really this is about acting on our conscience properly. When you are acting properly on your conscience, you will have that ability to make a lot better choices. You will feel better about yourself. You will build up, not tear down, your spiritual dimensions, your social dimensions, your mental dimensions, and your physical dimensions. So you need to do the next right thing. So if you like this outdoor philosophy, check out the rest of the playlist. We cover various good business and success books on this particular series. The rest of the channel, we do Linux and privacy and technology stuff, but this is just something a little different. If you'd like to support the channel, check out switchtolinux.com/support to learn about all the current ways to support what we do. Currently, we have Patreon, patreon.com/TomM. And we also have an Amazon links down below. If you want to buy something on Amazon, feel free to use that link, and a portion of that sale will come back to Switch to Linux. So thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.